One thing I've always appreciated about manga and anime is the diversity of its genres. Action-adventure series with fantastic or supernatural elements certainly rule the mainstream, of course, but there are tons of other niches in the medium that are quite large as well, such as the sports genre. Sports manga and anime can be some of the most exciting and exhilarating experiences, but they tend to be overlooked aside from a few big hits, especially out here in the West. Even so, I feel like the sports genre definitely has an appeal that's worth putting time into, and the one manga that sells it the best to me is Slam Dunk. Slam Dunk was the first breakout hit of mangaka Takehiko Inoue, who you might know as the creator of the samurai manga Vagabond. The story follows a Shohoku basketball team, a collection of ragtag underdogs and general bad boys as they vie for the national championships, battling strong opponents and dealing with interpersonal rivalries all the while. It's a premise that is as worn out now as it was back then, for sure, but Slam Dunk has one thing that uniquely makes it ideal for showing off the appeal of sports: its main character, Hanamichi Sakuragi. You see, one of the sports genre's strengths is its focus on character growth and development. After all, one reason why watching sports in real life is so popular is because you can get invested in a player's or a team's journey towards victory, and fictional sports stories make that easier by just giving the audience a team or a player to automatically root for. You still need to have strong characters that are worth caring about or rooting for, of course, and the best sports anime always have memorable characters with strong motivations, like Ippo from Hajime no Ippo or Takumi from Initial D. When it comes to creating memorable characters, of course, Inoue is first class, even in one of his earliest works. The cast of Slam Dunk aren't just some of my favorite characters in sports manga, they're some of my favorite characters in manga and anime, period. Whether it's the stern yet passionate Captain Akagi, the surprisingly hot-headed basketball ace Rukawa, or even side characters like Sakuragi's delinquent friends or the various coaches that lead each team. Every character bursts with charm, heart, and personality in a way that few others do. Inoue's artwork specifically does a lot to help express these aspects. While he's known for his incredibly detailed art style, he's also not afraid to portray his characters as goofy caricatures as well, and that gives them a lot of individuality. In my opinion, however, no one character is more important to Slam Dunk's core themes and premise than Hanamichi Sakuragi. A former delinquent constantly on the search for love, Sakuragi joins Shohoku's basketball team in order to win the affections of his newest crush. Despite being a literal newbie when it comes to basketball, Sakuragi's raw athleticism and physicality end up drawing the attention of the basketball team, who find themselves placing their hopes in him despite his grating personality. Now, I've read and seen a fair amount of sports manga and anime, and for the most part, sports protagonists usually come in two main flavors. They're either once-in-a-lifetime prodigies looking to make their mark on the sport, or they're underdogs without much skill or experience, but make up for it with either a unique ability or just pure passion. Both styles of protagonists make it really easy for readers to get invested in their journey, which is why they're so common in sports anime and manga. Sakuragi is pretty unique as a protagonist because he's kind of neither of these. He's certainly no prodigy, though he has some level of athletic ability, and while he's certainly a newcomer, he doesn't even really like basketball, at least in the beginning. When it comes to his personality, he's incredibly arrogant, constantly gets in over his head, and hardly ever listens to the advice of others. In another series, he'd be a side character that gets played for comic relief as he's benched for more likable characters, or even beaten by the protagonist to showcase their talents or incredible work ethic. For a more direct comparison, let's put Sakuragi up against Shoyo Hinata, the protagonist of Haikyuu, another incredibly popular sports anime. Hinata is incredibly passionate and dedicated to becoming the greatest volleyball player ever, but is handicapped by his short height, a disadvantage he has to contend with in every match he plays. Meanwhile, Sakuragi's physical abilities make him perfect for basketball, but his lack of passion or interest in the sport means he ends up being anything but. With differing attitudes, strengths, and capabilities, Shoyo and Sakuragi are pretty much direct opposites, but as protagonists, they're meant to give the audience something to invest in and root for. For Shoyo, that's easy. The appeal of watching him overcome his disadvantages and work towards his goal of victory is a pretty common formula in the sports genre. But then, what's the appeal of following Sakuragi as a protagonist? Well, that has a lot to do with what I think is the core through line of Slam Dunk's narrative. Unlike many other sports anime, Slam Dunk is not just about watching a team brave the odds in order to become national champions. It's about watching Sakuragi fall in love, not with his crush Haruko, or as some fans would have it, his rival Rukawa, but with the sport of basketball itself. It sounds corny, for sure, but if you've read the manga yourself, which I definitely recommend doing so, especially since I can't really talk about this without spoiling parts of the story, you realize that the biggest, most important growth moments for Sakuragi don't come when he beats a tough opponent or wins against a strong team. It's when he gets closer to respecting and enjoying basketball as a sport that Sakuragi has some of his most poignant and powerful moments of character development. In the beginning of the story, Sakuragi is nothing more than a punk with a trigger temper and a streak of hopeless romanticism. The last girl he confesses to rejects him for a basketball player, and as such, he goes berserk if he even hears the word. That all changes, of course, when he meets Haruko Akagi, who charms him instantly with her friendly and upbeat demeanor. Haruko is an avid basketball fan, and she instantly sees potential in Sakuragi, what with his tall stature and athletic build. She suggests that Sakuragi tries doing a slam dunk, and while he fails, the exhilaration of it all, plus the possibility of gaining Haruko's affections, pushes Sakuragi to join the basketball team. Naturally, Sakuragi is an utter newbie when it comes to the sport, and it really shows. He knows nothing about the rules of basketball, and when it comes to practicing fundamentals, he finds it not just boring, but beneath him. Having nothing but impure motives for joining the basketball team, as well as an inflated ego thanks to Haruko's flattering, Sakuragi is the other picture of an arrogant brat who's vastly overestimated himself, and the presence of Kaede Rukawa, an actual basketball ace, only sends his fragile ego into overdrive. If you're a reader used to more conventional sports manga protagonists, it can be really easy to get annoyed with him at this point. All Sakuragi seems to want to do is a slam dunk, and at this point, it's the only thing about basketball that really interests him. At the same time though, Sakuragi's budding relationship with basketball has already begun to bear fruit. There are a lot of comedic beats in the early parts of Slam Dunk, with one particular side plot being Akagi's longtime friend, Tatsuhiko Aota, constantly trying to recruit Sakuragi for the judo club. Despite being hammered with tedious fundamentals practice and what he perceives as a lack of respect from the other members of the basketball club, Sakuragi stays resolute about being a member of the basketball team. In these little moments, removed from his affections for Haruko, we can already see that Sakuragi is already beginning to become attached to basketball, even before he's gotten any good at it. When it comes to actually playing the game, Sakuragi's performance in the early parts is positively ludicrous, and if it weren't for his occasional displays of incredible physicality, he'd be nothing more than a clown on the court. He has little to no understanding of the rules or the strategy of basketball, and his contributions to the team are minimal at best. He's much more often a detriment to the team than he is an asset, and if it weren't for Shohoku's lack of strong players, he'd probably never get a chance at the starting lineup. It's through these terrible performances, however, that we get a chance to see a moment of growth for Sakuragi. Early on, Sakuragi's biggest problem isn't beating a tough rival team or learning a technique that will allow him to contribute more in matches. Instead, it's staying in the match itself without getting fouled out. Sakuragi's got a real temper, and even though he knows what fouls are, when he gets angry, he can't help but lash out physically when someone gets in his way, even if they're just playing their part in the game. It's yet another early example of his lack of respect for basketball. Eventually, Sakuragi reaches a turning point for the better when he swallows his pride and asks his team captain, Akagi, for advice on how to avoid fouling out. It's a small moment, and it doesn't change things for him drastically, but it's something that shows that he can put aside his ego and delusions of grandeur to ask for help from someone he accepts is doing better than him. It's also a moment that shows that Sakuragi really does like basketball on some level, seeing as he's going this far to figure out a way to stay in the match, and a great example of how his growth comes not from victory or from gaining new skills, but from gaining respect for others and the sport itself. Another big moment of growth for Sakuragi comes during the match against Kainan, the strongest team in their qualifying region. The Kainan match in general holds a lot of regrets for the Shohoku team as a whole. Akagi gets injured early on and can't contribute for a large part of the game, and Rukawa and Mitsui, the team's top scorers, end up being unable to contribute much near the end due to their lack of stamina. With Kainan's core members being some of the best players in the region, Shohoku's players basically spend the entire game with their backs against the wall, with even the smallest mistake leading to tragedy. That's what makes it so painful when Sakuragi makes a huge mistake during the last few seconds of the match, basically losing the game for Shohoku. To make things worse, at this point, Sakuragi is fully aware what making it to the national championships means for his teammates. Akagi in particular has spent his entire high school career dreaming of winning the nationals, but never had a team that could do it until this year. It's his last chance to make his dream come true, and because of Sakuragi, he almost lost it. If this was Sakuragi from the beginning of the series, he might have made an excuse, blamed something irrelevant, or just straight up left. However, Sakuragi has at this point really bonded with the rest of the team, and even Akagi, who to him has been a scolding teacher at worst and a strict older brother at best, is someone he's come to respect and even admire somewhat. As such, he can't help but feel that he let everyone down, especially in one of the most important games of the tournament. This is a huge change for someone who used to see his teammates as nothing more than side characters. And while his personality doesn't change a lot, it's clear that he's taking basketball a lot more seriously than he used to. Of course, Sakuragi is also learning to enjoy basketball a lot more as well. One scene that I find particularly effective at showing this comes in the middle of the series, where Sakuragi is taken aside so he can finally learn to shoot like an actual basketball player. It's tedious, boring practice, almost the same kind of practice he used to do early on as a beginner, but Sakuragi actually finds himself really enjoying this process. Sure, practicing shooting hoops is admittedly more fun than practicing dribbling, but it's also tangible proof that Sakuragi is really coming to enjoy playing basketball for its own sake more than anything else. As moments like this continue to pile up, Sakuragi starts to look less like a clown and more like a real basketball player. Now, to be sure, Sakuragi as a character and a player never changes too much. And at the end of the series, he's still a rather arrogant guy who keeps forgetting about basic rules like traveling and double dribbling. However, it's only because Sakuragi is the person that he is that we're able to have a journey like slam dunks. And that's really important to the core of the manga's themes. You see, Takehiko Inoue didn't just write Slam Dunk to show you Sakuragi falling in love with basketball, he wanted you to fall in love with basketball as well. When it comes to sports in Japan, baseball and soccer tend to be the most popular, with sumo and martial arts some distance behind. Basketball, especially around the late 80s and early 90s, when this manga would have been conceived and published, wasn't all that popular, and Inoue even notes in the afterword for Slam Dunk that he'd been specifically told by an editor that writing a basketball manga would just be setting himself up for failure. What changed all of that was Slam Dunk itself. The manga's success would go on to spur a wave of popularity for basketball in Japan, to the point that Inoue has even received commendations from the Japan Basketball Association for it. Multiple Japanese pro basketball players cite Slam Dunk as their inspiration, and hell, even I started playing basketball a little bit casually after reading Slam Dunk myself. I think the reason why Inoue was able to do this with Slam Dunk was because of how he told Sakuragi's story. Not as a tale of someone overcoming rival after rival, but as someone who started off not caring less about the sport, slowly coming to love it. You know Sakuragi as a rank amateur with no skills, so when he pulls off even the most basic of maneuvers, such as shooting a ball or even putting up a screen, you kind of get hyped for it. That continues even as Sakuragi starts thinking about things like tactics and strategy, because as he's been growing as a player, you've been growing alongside with him. It also helps that Inoue depicts the basketball matches themselves as incredibly tense and exciting, and he did so without injecting battle manga style elements to compete with the more vibrant spectacles of more popular shonen franchises like Dragon Ball or JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Prince of Tennis and Kuroko no Basket are pretty prominent examples of series that have relied on doing that to stand out from the crowd, while Blue Lock is a more recent example. It's certainly a great way to grab the attention of fans who tend to prefer flashier, impact-heavy shows compared to more mundane sports manga. I mean, it even worked on me, as Prince of Tennis was the first sports manga I ever read specifically because of how flashy it was. However, I do think that approach does lead to the sports aspect of it being diluted. As fun as Prince of Tennis was, by the end of it, the players were more performing wizardry than they were actually playing tennis. In comparison, Slam Dunk never shied away from the fact that it was a basketball manga about basketball, and as a result, the charm of the sport itself was always on display. I'm not saying it was unerringly realistic. Sakuragi does do some crazy things over the course of the series, but it never pulled too far away from real basketball, and I think the fact that the manga was showing people things they could do in the sport in real life was a major part of why it was so successful in drumming up popularity for the sport itself. It's for all these reasons and more that I think of Slam Dunk as the greatest sports manga ever, and one of my favorite manga of all time. It's highly rated in multiple polls, surveys, and review sites, so it's not just me that feels that way. However, I have to say that it also served as a gateway to a world I never thought I'd like until I read it. You see, Slam Dunk didn't just show me how to appreciate basketball, it showed me how to appreciate sports manga and anime as a whole. I'm a pretty stereotypical nerd. I was never very athletic as a kid, and as a result, I always preferred reading and playing video games over playing and watching sports. Of course, that also meant that I was never all that interested in reading sports manga myself. I mean, I didn't like sports to begin with. Just because I liked manga and anime didn't mean that I was going to like a manga or anime about sports, right? The first manga that proved me wrong was, as I said before, Prince of Tennis. It showed me that I could in fact be interested in sports manga, though it was such an exaggerated version of the sport that ultimately, how I particularly felt about tennis itself didn't factor much into my enjoyment. It did get me to read more sports manga though, which was how I discovered the American football manga Eyeshield 21, written by Dr. Stone's Riichiro Inagaki and illustrated by One Punch Man's Yusuke Murata. With two individualistic and idiosyncratic creators working on this series, I was drawn in by the characters' big personalities and the bombast from which they approached the sport, though once again, what I liked about it didn't really have a lot to do with the actual sport. Still, Eyeshield 21 showed me that I really could like sports manga, and it's still one of my favorites to this day. It really took Slam Dunk, however, to take me from someone who could appreciate the sports genre to someone who not only liked it, but also sought out more options and stories in that genre. And it did that by showing me the charm of the sport itself, rather than relying on gimmicks or special powers to get me through the sports segments, like hiding carrots in your kid's food. Slam Dunk just gave me pure basketball action, and in doing so, it showed me that basketball was something that could be just as exciting as a climactic battle between two superhuman fighters. I'd still probably call basketball my favorite sport, even if I'm not exactly inclined to watch it on TV. I have since read a lot of sports manga, and while I'm far from well versed in the genre, I've found a lot to appreciate that I wouldn't have found anywhere else. No, they're not all hits, but the best of them come with the same kind of exhilaration, excitement, and inspiration that Slam Dunk does, and it's a feeling I find hard to get rid of now that I've got a taste of it. Big series like Haikyuu and Hajime no Ippo have obviously become huge favorites of mine, but there's a wealth of lesser known series like Ace of Diamond and Awashi that have managed to dig their way into my heart as well. The burning adrenaline of a manga like Hinomaru Sumo, the breathless exhilaration of a story like Yowamushi Pedal, and a passionate teamwork in a series like Rookies are all things I could have missed out on completely were it not for Slam Dunk, and I'm eternally grateful to have experienced them. Hell, even a manga like Days, which is by all account a pretty standard soccer manga with some pretty tropey characters, a cliche underdog protagonist, and a pretty unassuming art style, still manages to tug at my heartstrings from time to time and still knows how to amp up the tension just right to get me hype at the biggest moments. Like, there's a match deep in the manga against a top team that's like 4 volumes long, and everyone's struggling to get even a single goal in, and every chapter is bite your nails tense in the best way possible. It's probably one of the most exciting story arcs I've read in a good while, and I never would have bothered if it weren't for Slam Dunk. I don't know. Maybe I'm the type to like sports after all, and if I just had the right impetus, I'd be the one sitting in the living room watching the game on a big screen TV. I mean, I do like watching fighting game tournaments, and that's basically a sport in itself already, isn't it? Well, whatever the case, I think it's pretty clear that to me and to a lot of people, Slam Dunk epitomizes that experience in a way very few other manga can. And that, combined with its legacy, makes it perfect for illustrating exactly what makes sports manga and anime so exciting. It's the king of the genre, and it's likely to stay that way for a very long time. But you know, there's a lot of other great sports manga and anime out there too. If you have one that you love, let me know about it in the comments below. I'm always down for recommendations. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see what videos I've got coming out next. This was a video from Square One, and thanks for watching.